All right, so now we're going to jump in and we're going to make our first game. So what we're going to need to start off with doing is adding objects to our screen. You'll notice down here in the menu bar that I have my object tool selected. Now you can click with the right-hand side of your mouse and select Add Object. That is an option. However, you can also click with your right or your left-hand side of the mouse, and it will display all of the objects that you can add to the screen. So these are the many built-in objects that are in Kodu. You can see you have a Kodu, a rover, an apple. If you click here, you'll see additional objects that you can add. There are many options. Even if you go to trees, there's multiple types of trees. There are a plethora of objects that you can add in Kodu. So we're going to start just by adding a basic Kodu today. And if you click on Kodu, you'll see that we add a Kodu directly to our screen, and then we can move around, we can see our Kodu, etc., etc. So our Kodu is on there. We have added him to our screen. So if we select the object tool again, if you hover over the Kodu, you'll notice up in the left-hand corner that you have a multitude of objects, or multitude of options. So you could click tab if you had multiple characters on there. But right now, the one big thing is if we want to change the color, we can use the arrows. So you can see as I move and use the arrows on my keyboard that the Kodu itself actually changes color. So I'm going to change my Kodu to be red. And then from here, I need to add a few more objects because I actually want my Kodu to eat apples on the screen. So again, I'm going to make sure my object tool in the menu bar is selected. Click with the left-hand side of my mouse anywhere out here. And I'm going to add 5 apples. Now we can see that the apples are very low on our screen, and our Kodu seems to be up kind of high, and I want my Kodu to look like he's walking on the ground. So what I can do here is I can actually right click on my Kodu, and now that the Kodu is on the screen, I have a lot of options, and I can go into change settings, change size. Right now, however, I want to change his height because he's pretty far off the ground, and you'll notice as I click and change his height, I can make him move up and down, and I'm going to put him right there at the very bottom so that he can look like he is sitting on the actual grass. So I've now programmed my Kodu. He is on the grass, he is red, and he has apples around him. So I've changed some of his characteristics, and now I'm going to go in and add instructions for action. So if I, again, right-click on my Kodu, I have the option to program him, and I'm going to select Program. And what you'll see here is Kodu is set up to be an assortment of when do statements. So essentially we're going to say, when you encounter this type of situation here, do this instruction. It's very much like an if-then conditional. If this is occurring, then do this. So we are going to start by programming the Kodu to move. So we're going to say when the buttons on the keyboard are pressed. That's their goal. So we're going to say when, and here we have many options. I'm going to choose the keyboard. So when the keyboard is being used, and then I need to tell them which numbers to use or which letters or whatnot. So here for movement, we have the choice of arrows and WASD. Now you could be more specific with different ones and use different letters, numbers, and whatnot, but they do give you the option for those traditional keyboard movement keys. So I'm going to select the arrows. I'm going to say when the arrows are pressed. So I've given it its when instruction. What do I want to happen? Well, I want the Kodu to move. And what will happen now is, according to the instructions here, the Kodu will move around the screen. So if I press my escape key, that will get me back here. I can press play. And now if I use my arrow keys, my Kodu will move around my screen. So I've tested that out. I know that the movement works. Now if I press escape, it will take me back and I can continue to program. So I know that my movement of my Kodu works. Now, if I click on my object tool again at the bottom and I right click on my Kodu, I can go and you'll notice what happened when I finished that first instruction is that a second instruction possibility was added because I had written one instruction, so it wants to give me the opportunity to write another. And that will continue to happen as you add more and more. It'll constantly open up a spot to add another instruction. So now we're going to program the Kodu to eat an apple when he does in fact interact with it. So we'll click on the when. And it says when, and you can see this word bumped at the bottom. So when we bump with, we want to bump with an apple. And now you'll see right now that an apple doesn't necessarily appear right off the bat, but I have lots of options. So if I click on objects, you'll notice it opens up more and more possibilities. So I want to say when I bump with an apple. When I bump with an apple, what do I want to happen? Well, I want my Kodu to eat that apple. That's the instruction I want to happen. So when we are bumping into that apple, we are going to eat it. So if we press escape and we go back to our screen here, we can see that we have our apples out here and we can test our code. So if I press play, now I notice that my Kodu still moves, but if I get close enough and bump into an apple, the Kodu actually eats my apple. And I can eat all 5. So I've tested it out and I can see that my Kodu can eat an apple and my Kodu can move. Now if I press escape, it takes me back to this screen right here. So now you've created the first part of this game. We've gotten the Kodu to move and we've gotten the Kodu to eat apples. So make sure that that's working on your screen, and then the next video will show you how to keep track of a score. So to track, okay, he's eaten 1 apple, 2 apples, 3 apples, and then this next video as well will teach you how to end the game when the Kodu has won or eaten 5 apples. So make sure that this first beginning portion works on your game, and then you can move on to the second